When it comes to fountain pens, no matter what anybody tells you, size matters. But sometimes people go overboard. Hello everyone, welcome to The Pen Habit. My name is Matt Armstrong, and I am glad to have you here for another fountain pen review. Now, earlier in the season, I did a review of the Dolcevita Federico Stantuffo, which is a piston-filled, fairly low-cost version of Delta's pens that was available exclusively through the Italian retailer Marte Modena. I like the pen a lot. It's a good pen. But I also wanted to do another review of a Delta, and it looks very similar. You know, they're very similar in appearance. This is another Delta Dolcevita. This is the Delta Dolcevita Oversize. So you can see here it is larger. It's not a whole lot longer. It is a little longer, but not a whole lot. But it is much wider. It's a much girthier pen. So a couple of differences between these pens to get started off with. The Federico had steel fittings and kind of a laser etched center, cap band here. The fittings on the Federico Stantuffo are silver, or excuse me, on the Dolcevita Oversized are silver. And you can tell the difference between the engraving here. It's much deeper engraved. I have heard it called hand engraved. I don't know if that's true or not, but I will tell you it is not, just a simple passing of the laser over the top of the metal surface. So right off the bat, this pen has a slightly more luxe, slightly more expensive feel to it. The Dolcevita line is Delta's kind of master line, and they've come up with a bazillion different varieties and variations on a theme. But this classic orange and black with either the gold vermeil trim, which is gold-plated silver, or the silver trim is kind of the base from which all of this stems. So to start off with the design, you've got a Delta logo inset into the top of the cap, and then you've got this black acrylic finial. Got a silver ring, and there's a little notch in the ring through which the clip goes. The clip is one of Delta's rollerball clips, and rollerball, that's probably the wrong term to use when you're talking about pens. The little wheel clip. It's nice and stiff, but still flexible enough that you can get under there. You've got a second little band here, and then the engraved band in the center section. On the back, you've got Delta Dolcevita Oversize, and then a serial number and Italy. Now, I will tell you, I've used this pen very little, and that's already starting to come off. I mean, the 7's almost completely gone. The vertical on the D's almost gone. That's unfortunate for a pen that costs as much as this one does. You figured they'd come up with a slightly better way of doing that without, having wear off. The barrel actually expands just a little bit toward the finial here, and it's made of this orange resin. Now, it used to be, I believe, that Delta's Dolcevita line, the orange was actually a celluloid, not a resin. The celluloid, I know that my Delta Unica was made of orange celluloid that looked almost identical to this. But this is not celluloid, it's resin, at least according to the website where I ordered it and everything I've seen online. So if it used to be celluloid, it isn't anymore. If it didn't used to be celluloid, now you know. Then you've got another silver band and a big black finial down here. Now this looks like a piston knob. Unfortunately, it's not, because this is not a piston-filled pen. So let's, cap comes off with a single turn. Let's do that again, because it's so nice. Ta-da! One turn. Love it, love it, love it. Under the cap, you have a very fat section, and it's short, and then you've got the threads right there. Now, the threads are not super sharp, but they're also not super flat either. They're a little deep, so you could feel them. Then you've got this massive nib. I mean, it really is a large nib. And for comparison's sake, I'm going to pull up a couple of other flagship pens to give you nib size comparisons here. I mean, you're looking at very similar nib sizes to both the Pelikan M1000 and the Mont Blanc 149. So, you know, quite large nib on this nib unit. Even still, it looks undersized based on the width of this pen. I mean, look at the grips on these pens. The Mont Blanc 149 is known for having a huge chunky grip. Look at the comparison on that to this Delta. I mean, it's ludicrous. Ludicrous. Anyway, we'll get to that when we get to the measurements. But the nib is really quite lovely. Let me go ahead and cap these other pens and get them out of the way. It's, you know, got the Delta logo here, and then it says Delta 14K 585. And then you've got the hallmark over here on the side, and a little M. I don't know how well you can see that on the side of the nib here for medium. It appears, based on the feed, this is probably a Bach-made nib. I don't know that for sure, but that's usually Bach's feeds look like this. It's really quite a lovely nib. It is 14 karat gold, but it is rhodium plated to match the trim. And it is it's a cartridge converter filled pen. So it's relatively unusual to see a nib this large with cartridge or converter, but you know, it comes with a Delta branded converter. And you've got a little rubber O-ring here. I have not tried. I think the reason for the O-ring is you see that the threads are metal on the inside of the barrel, but if you wanted to use this as an eyedropper, you probably could, which is probably why that rubber O-ring is there. I have never felt the need to try that. You know, I don't mind cartridge converter pens. I change inks often enough, and I often have so many pens inked that the idea of having a bunch of piston-filled pens or eyedroppered pens at the same time is just, it's no good. Now, that doesn't work for me. I change inks way too frequently. Okay, so let's talk through some comparisons. And I already showed you comparisons to the, you know, to the nibs, but here's the pen bodies for the Mont Blanc, the Pelikan M1000, and the Pelikan M800. So you can see it's still on the short side, even shorter than the M1000 by a little bit, but probably easily the widest of those four pens. And then when you want to compare it to some less expensive pens, here is the Lamy All-Star, TWSBI Eco, Pilot Metropolitan, and Esterbrook J for comparison's sake. And then measurement-wise, you've got 140.4 millimeters, so it's not hugely long, and 130.4 uncapped. So still long enough that it can be used without posting. It does post to make a very long 175, and this feels a little back heavy to me. It doesn't feel, I mean, it won't fall over, but it doesn't feel balanced in my hand particularly well when it's posted. I much prefer it to use it unposted. The section diameter is a ludicrous 15 millimeters. I mean, it's ludicrous. It's huge. So if you've got gigantic hands, fantastic, but if you don't, the oversize is not the right pen for you. You know, it's like, I like big pens, but this is too big even for me. Widest point of the barrel is 15.8 millimeters, and the widest point of the cap is 18.7 millimeters. So it's a big honkin' pen. This won't fit in a lot of my pen holders. It won't fit in my pen case. I have to put it in a separate my pen box, because the slots are too narrow for this pen. It's just a gargantuan pen. It's 30 grams capped, or uncapped, excuse me, and 45 capped or posted. So nice middleweight pen here. You know, it is still acrylic, so it's going to be light for its size. In general, I like the design a lot. I love the center band. I love the carving on the center band. Orange and black are not my favorite combination, as I've said in other videos, but I just can't get over how honking huge this pen is. It's a good thing it writes as well as it does, because it writes really well. So let's go ahead and do the writing sample. I'll show you all about that. So here we have the Delta Dolcevita Oversize. We have a 14 karat gold medium nib. And this does look to be pretty much a standard European width medium. Then we have Visconti turquoise for the ink. That's not an F, it's a T, Matt. All right, here is your quote. Okay. So this is, I think, the 4th or 5th Delta pen that I've reviewed. I've yet to have a Delta pen that didn't have a spectacular nib in it. Even the you know, Fusion 82 that I got that had the little gold saddle that fell off the nib, it was a spectacular nib. Still is a spectacular nib because I still have the pen. Really just a lovely, lovely writer. It's very smooth, probably about a 2.5 on the Matt Armstrong feedback scale. Really nicely adjusted, really superb ink flow, and you know, it's a pretty wet. It's not pretty wet. It's real wet. You can see here. It's a nice juicy pen, which I love. Love that. I love me a juicy pen. Even though it is 14 karat gold, you can get a little bit of line variation. What you can really get is ink flow variation out of it if you push it a little bit. It's a very rigid nib, so you're not going to get a ton of variation out of that, but man, you do get that nice, actually you can push a little bit of variation out. And being 14K, you're a little less likely to spring it, but I wouldn't worry so much about trying to flex this pen. That's really not what it's made for, he says as he's flexing the pen. So anyway, yeah, it's not going to give you the same as even a semi-flex or a flex or a semi-flex pen, but it does have a nice little bounce to it that is probably helped by the fact that it is a huge honking nib. Reverse writer, it does reverse write. It's a bit scratchy, but it performs pretty well. It's a little bit on the wet side still, even at that, but it is a nice fine line. You can see there's a lot of ink being laid down on the paper here. But for the most part, this nib is just really superb. I wish if they had taken this pen with this exact same nib, the same size nib, and narrowed the section by 3 millimeters down to 12 millimeters and made it a little concave, I think this pen might be in my top 5. It's that nice. Now, I'm going to show you a quick comparison here. Here is the section of the medium size. So this is the Federico Stantuffo, but it's the middle size as opposed to the oversize. This is the oversize. So you can see the section is better on this pen, but this nib is just so much larger. I'd love to see this nib on this pen. And then I think this pen might very easily make it into my top, top 5, top 10. As it is, it's such a superb writer. I would almost be willing to put up with this, but I find the grip to be just too big. I almost have to retrain my hand every time I pick this up to write. I love the pen. It's beautiful. It's a beautiful pen. This is a flagship pen, and it's got a price tag to match. Now, I can't really give you a price on this pen, and I'm not doing that to be churlish. It's just that prices are all over the map. I've seen them as low as $479. I've seen them as high as $899. In any case, you're going to be spending several hundreds of dollars for this pen. So it's not a cheap pen by any stretch of the imagination. What I would suggest, though, is if you're going to buy this pen, buy it from a retailer you trust. Because the problem with Delta muddied the waters a while back with some of the models that they made available. And so you want to make sure that if you're going to get a Dolcevita Oversize, if you're going to get a nice pen like this, get it from a retailer you trust and that has a good return policy, even if you have to pay a little extra. That would be my advice. Now, I did pay for this out of my own pocket. I like this pen a lot. It is really a lovely pen. I got a killer deal from it because I bought it from Marte Modena back when they had lower prices. It seems like their prices aren't as good as they used to be kind of across the board. And this particular pen goes for basically the same price on their website as it does for most of the other websites that I've seen. So at least with this particular pen, expect to pay, I'd say, somewhere in the $600 to $800 range is probably what I would pay. I wouldn't go for any of those super cheap pens because you might be getting something that's not what you expect. Or if you do get it at a much better price, make sure it's from a retailer you really, really trust. So, beautiful pen, very nicely made, a gorgeous nib, way too big for my hands, very expensive, but still a really lovely, lovely pen. So, if you have any questions, please go ahead and email them to me at penhabit@gmail.com or leave them over at penhabit.com or here on YouTube. You can also find me on Facebook at facebook.com/penhabit, or @penhabit is my handle on Twitter as well. Thank you so much for watching, and as we're getting close to the end of the season, don't forget to check back often to the Penhabit website for the big monster giveaway that will be happening toward the end of May. It's going to be huge, so keep an eye out for that because it's coming very soon, very soon. So thanks so much for watching, and we will see you here next time on the Penhabit. Bye.